Hey mamas, you're listening to the Balanced Working Mama podcast, the only podcast teaching you how to balance your work, motherhood, and wellness. I am Dr. Amber Thornton, clinical psychologist and mama wellness consultant. Each week we dive into tips and strategies and much more so that you too can become a balanced working mama. Let's dive in. Hey mamas, it's Dr. Amber here, and welcome to the Balanced Working Mama podcast. I hope that y'all are doing well. I'm feeling pretty good, y'all. I'm still kind of like coming down from my vacation that I took recently, but then also Eden is one. So we're over here, enjoying this new two toddlers in the house thing. Um, and so far, so good. I will definitely be sharing a little bit more about that journey later. But I first want to tell you all about today's episode. So, if you follow me on Instagram, you probably have noticed I've been talking a little bit more about mental health, especially for mothers and motherhood. I like talking about wellness as a whole because I think wellness encompasses many, many things, including our physical well being, our mental health, our social well being. There's so many things that are included when we're thinking about wellness, but then also balance in motherhood. But I do think that mental health really deserves its own space and a place where we really can talk more specifically about mental health and all the things that we need in order to better advocate for our mental health as mothers. So, as a psychologist, am someone who's always going to push you and encourage you to advocate for your mental health needs and, seek the things that will help ensure quality mental health for you and your family. And I found someone to help me do that on the podcast today. So today I will be talking to Rosyln Rene. She is someone that I have bonded with on Instagram, of course. Y'all know a lot of my friends, we kick it on the internet. And one day we're all going to meet in person and be happy together. But Rosyln is so amazing. I love following her. I love chatting with her. I really enjoyed this conversation. And today we talk about advocating for mental health in motherhood. I think advocating for mental health, period, is important, but then advocating for mental health once you become a mother is a different thing. And it requires a different type of effort and a different level of awareness around what you need when it comes to your mental health. So I hope that y'all enjoy this episode today with me and Rosyln. We talk all about what it looks like to advocate for your mental health, how you know when you need to do it, how to support it, all those things. So enjoy this episode, and I hope that you all will start to advocate for your mental health even more. Okay, let's get into it. Hey, mamas. So, we have a very, very, very special guest. I'm super excited about this conversation also because prior to hitting record, we actually just chatted for like 30 minutes about life. And so it was so helpful for me. And I'm just so grateful for the conversation. And I'm excited for this podcast episode. So, Rosyln, will you please introduce yourself and let us know why you're here?
Hey y'all. So my name is Rosyln Rene on Instagram and just kind of what I go by in general on the internet. I am a wife and mom of a beautiful, beautiful, almost 14-month-old baby boy. I am a podcaster, full-time entrepreneur, and coach. I'm also a licensed therapist, or LCSW for those of you that know what those acronyms mean. And yeah, so my podcast is called Therapy as a Christian, where I talk about all things mental health and God. And my business is so many different things, but primarily I do coaching around Show Up Sis, which is basically a platform for me to help women not only manage their time, manage the things that they have in front of them, but also I truly believe that we can be the best versions of ourselves when we show up. So I help a lot of women overcome just the mental blocks that cause them from actually showing up, managing the things that are on their plate. And so I've been doing that for 2 years. And yeah, so I have a ton of stuff, girl, going on. I'm excited to be with you, Amber.
Oh my gosh, thank you. I'm excited too. And I already know that you're so good at the work that you do because you got me together before this episode. Like we were just literally just chatting about like entrepreneurship and working and motherhood and truly this journey you all, I talk about it online every now and then. Like it's a tough one. It's one that is very passionate and fulfilling. And there are moments where it's like, yo, what am I doing? Why am I doing this? Like, what is going on? Like, everything feels crazy. And so I appreciate you for like just validating that for me before we hit record. And
Yeah.
just, I'm excited to talk about the topic of advocating for mental health in motherhood because I know that that's something that you support women around. And I just want to like be able to talk with you about that today. But my first question for you is, how did your journey with mental health even begin? Like, how did this become a thing for you?
Yeah, so my professional background is in social work. I got my master's degree in 2016. And very early on in my graduate school process, I had tons of professors that advocated for mental health. So I actually went to therapy for the first time when I was 24. I was in a class, and one of my professors said, every good therapist needs a therapist. And at the time, I didn't know I was going to be a therapist. But I was like, well, I might as well go, and went and actually was in therapy at my university for about a year. And so it was my first taste of, I guess you could call like self-awareness. And it wasn't something that was prompted by like culture or society like the way it is now. But I don't think I was at the emotional maturity level to go deep dive in or even knew what that meant at the time at 24. So I had a couple more experiences with therapy throughout that process, but it wasn't until I got engaged to my now husband. I was 27 at the time, and planning a wedding is just GHETTO in general. Okay. But also, I remember when we got engaged, the rush of my childhood came back to me, and I just started to think about my parents who didn't have a very successful marriage. They were married for a long time, but even throughout the process of them being married, it was very just a lot of turmoil. And I got to witness that firsthand being the kid in the house. And so I just remember thinking me and my husband weren't gonna make it. Like I just remember it feeling like I don't know how to be a wife. I don't really know how that looks. What does that even mean? And I was 27 at the time. And but also I had always struggled with anxiety, worry, and didn't really understand. Like I knew in a professional sense what trauma meant, but I didn't think that firsthand I was experiencing trauma reactions or things of that nature. And so mental health was new in my mind, but I didn't really know what it meant to have healthy mental health or like what that actually meant. So I remember having an experience where I was at work and I had an interaction with a coworker, and I just remember feeling so overwhelmed from talking to her. I said, I just need to talk to somebody. And I remember actually at the time, a website popped in my head. It was called Open Path Collective. I had heard it on Myleek's podcast, who I love. I love Myleek. And actually called the therapist and got connected with her. And that was all she wrote. And I've been in therapy as a client now for 4 years.
That's amazing. Um, yeah, so much of what you said really resonated. Like, I know for me, just like the different stages of life that I've been in recently, like you said, getting married, it kind of like just opens up this floodgates of like all these things that like you maybe didn't remember, or like maybe you did and you just like pushed them aside, or you thought you were over it and now it's just like whoa.
Yeah.
Like I know, for instance, my husband and I often talk about like, you know not recreating the things that we've experienced from our parents in our marriage unintentionally, right? Or sometimes I might respond or react to him in a certain way and then realize it's actually because of something that I witnessed between my mom and dad. You know what I'm saying? So
Yeah,
it's
yeah,
like,
yeah.
it gets deep. It can
Yeah, it
get
does. It does get deep. And I when I went to therapy, I just was like, "Oh yeah, I'm experiencing anxiety." Girl, I had no idea we were going back to like 8 years old, talking about daddy issues and mommy issues and just the layers and layers and layers. Like I said, I've been in therapy for 4 years now, and it's just shocking how much happens and what you're not even realizing, from just starting the process of really dealing with the baseline of things. So It's been a very interesting journey for me, and I've really, really come to understand what like self-awareness and what true mental health looks like.
Yeah.
And so I advocate for it not only professionally but also individually.
Absolutely. And of course, we're talking about, motherhood and advocating for mental health as a mom. And so I want to ask you, how about, the worlds of like motherhood and mental health? Like, how did that collide for you? And, I'm excited to hear what you say to this because also, like, when I became a mom, there was this whole other flood of like things
Mhm.
that I thought were either resolved already or like just didn't even realize was an issue. Like,
Girl,
sibling
girl,
issues, like mommy daughter issues, like just all these things started to pop up. But for you, how
yeah.
was that for you?
Yeah, so thankfully, I didn't have my son till I was about 2 almost 3 years in my therapy journey. So I had processed a lot of my parents' situation. I had processed a lot of feelings and projection I would put out on my husband. I was 3 when I started therapy, I was 3 months from getting married. So I was fresh, baby, like fresh ring, like the band wasn't even on me and I was going into talking about daddy issues, okay? So when I got pregnant, I had not been talking about that for a while with my therapist, but the thought of being pregnant and like dealing with mental health wasn't something I thought I would be so worried about because it just wasn't I was like, "Oh yeah, I'm healed. Like I've done the work. I've done the hard work, baby." But it's a whole nother thing when that child is in your arms, okay? I remember the first week struggling with breastfeeding
Mhm.
and just immediately defeating myself. And at the time, I had my son during the pandemic. So there was a lot of family couldn't visit and all this kind of stuff. And we made very clear boundaries about who was coming to visit. And so the first 2 weeks of my son being born, no family came. It was just me, my husband, and my doula.
Yeah.
My side of the family was not happy about it. They wanted to be there, they wanted to support. But I remember when I was struggling with breastfeeding, I remember I was talking to my mom on the phone and she was just like, "Well, maybe you don't need to breastfeed. Maybe you just need to like feed formula." And I remember just immediately feeling that moment, I'm not feeling supported. And I think a lot of times as moms, especially for me, what has come up more recently is like the struggles I've had with my mom and like the
Mhm.
enmeshment we had growing up,
Yeah.
how much it impacted me as a mom and how much I've now wanted to really fight for being a mom and
Yeah.
not like taking on so many opinions. And I think as a kid, when you are making when you've been told a lot of things or a lot of decisions have been made for you and become a parent, you almost have to like take it to another level of your boundaries. And so it's been like challenging to navigate. It's like I because I had been through therapy, I was able to voice to my husband, hey, like I was very clear with my doula about we need to make a postpartum plan before having my son. I was very big about, hey, I need a break away. Breastfeeding is already hard in general. So when you're having to like, my son's not latching, or I just want to feed him, he's crying, he's not comfortable. Am I doing something wrong as a mom? You immediately go into like the defeated mentality. And so I was very big about communicating to the people around me what I needed. But there were times though I was like, I feel like I'm probably struggling with some postpartum depression or different things like that. And I think when you don't know, it's really hard to like voice it because you're not really understanding what you're feeling. So it's very new. And I think for me, I actually discharged from therapy, got back into therapy when I was pregnant. And that was something I did constantly while I was still a new mom, which was necessary because at the time I didn't have an outlet. So I needed to be able to have somebody to go to that was outside of my family, outside of my husband, outside of the time I had with the baby to say, hey, I need help. Now, I was privileged to have my husband work from home. I was privileged to have a doula. I was privileged in so many ways to be able to be home I was home for 16 weeks. So there was a lot of privilege in my experience that afforded me to probably not experience a lot of mental health issues that would probably say a lot of my other friends experience, but there were still a lot of things that happened. So It's really challenging. I think you learn, like for me, I learned a lot of stuff related to just how much I had daddy issues and comfortability issues and all of those kinds of things. So yeah.
It all makes so much sense. And already I feel like you're kind of like giving us a glimpse of what it means to advocate for your mental health. But I agree. And I think sometimes it just kind of takes us by surprise, like how motherhood can really bring up all this old stuff.
Mhm.
Just related to your own family upbringing. And again, yeah, that has definitely been the case for me. And it's so interesting. Like it's been different for when I had my son and then when I had my daughter. Like when I had my son, there was like stuff that came up that was very unique to like raising a boy.
Mhm.
Then when I had my daughter, there were like these other things that I just didn't know were like issues that started to manifest in terms of like my mental health and how I was thinking about my role as a mom to her. And so I think it's just so interesting how these big life moments can really just like bring up a lot of stuff. And so what I'm hearing is that we cannot be afraid to ask for the support,
Yep.
and really like seek out the help that we need in terms of
Mhm.
mental health. But I wanted to ask you, like, as we're talking about advocating for your mental health, like, what does that even mean? Because there might be a mama who's listening and she's kind of like, I know I need to do it, but I don't really know what that actually means. So can you explain that?
Yeah. Yeah, the first thing I would say is any thought, any feeling, any emotion, you're not alone. I think it's so easy to feel isolated, even though we're in a stage in society where we have so much information and people are saying out of their mouths, like, this is what I'm experiencing. We still feel internally alone. And I think that is something very big to just demystify that you're not alone. Um, Isolation only breeds a stay in our head. So I think it's very important to advocate when it looks like advocating, reach out to anybody that you can even think of that would be of some support. I think the other thing that can be challenging is knowing the language of what to ask, because there are a lot of times you're just in the thick of it and you're like, I just feel overwhelmed. Or the verbiage I hear a lot from my clients before is, I feel overwhelmed. I feel like I don't have any control. I feel like I'm not handling things well. I feel like I don't feel like myself. I don't feel like I'm managing like I used to. And then the other thing with having a newborn is they grow so fast that your body and your mind are not catching up with their growth. So where you get used to, like I would get used to Elijah being 3 months and having a solid routine. And the next thing I knew, he was 6 months crawling. And I'm sitting up here like, I don't even know where the time went. And so knowing that it also goes fast means you can't hesitate. And I think with when we forget that we are moms, but we're also individual people. Like, yes, we're raising a human. Yes, we're stewarding a human. But at the end of the day, we're still an individual outside of motherhood. And so that care that we give to this kid is such an important thing, but the care we give to ourselves is probably even 100 more times more. So that means proper sleep. That means being able to, like, there were times I would get up 3 times in the middle of the night to pump. So if I would pump, hubby, you're going to give him the bottle. If I have to wake up and my boobs are full, I can't look at him and pump it. I don't, the sight of my child, I don't want to see right now. And not out of I don't love him, but out of this is like the 15 minutes I need. I The way I advocated to my husband during postpartum was make sure I take a shower and brush my teeth. Because those are the first 2 things that happen, like, you don't do when you have a baby. But it was a way for me to, I knew that those were the first things that would cause depression because all I wanna do is stay in my bed in the same pajamas all day. And so there were small things I asked for, like a simple meal or, those things we don't think are important. Sometimes it's not having a deep conversation with somebody. Sometimes just making sure you're eating, sleeping, all of those things. Get a housekeeper, get somebody to handle household things. Um, and then also too, just let sometimes the things be and you come back to it. And so I think advocating really is also that, and getting into accountability spaces, be in spaces where there are other moms who are experiencing and can really give you the language. Notice the signs. If you're starting to feel bad because your baby's crying and you're like, I just want to get away from you, there's a sign that you just might need a break. And it's safer to do that than to just let it go on for so long. And so I think advocating is stating what you need. Like, I need to just scroll my phone for 30 minutes away from the baby. I need to watch a movie. I need to be able to have a drink. I need to be able to go out of this house and go to Target. And so I think those are small things that we can do to really start advocating for ourselves.
I agree. And I think you also just did a really great job of kind of like helping us understand, like, if you are experiencing some sort of mental health experience or challenge, it doesn't mean that there's something wrong with you. Like you said, and again, I think it's taboo still for us to talk about this, but I think it's becoming more normalized, like the experience of like, if your baby cries and your first reaction is, ugh, I just want to get away, like that's normal.
And I'll
Like,
add this too. I'll add this too, Amber. Men don't process the same way we do.
right.
So I'll even add for those who are moms and wives, that men's temperament is a lot more calmer than sometimes us women. So we even sometimes, I know there were times I would find myself, my husband would just like be like, oh, it's not a big deal to take him. And I would want to have that same attitude, and
Hmm.
that would burn me out because I could not emotionally do that. And so you don't have to be on the same wavelength as your husband,
Absolutely.
because he is also a different person.
Hmm.
He's not getting his boob sucked on every 2 hours, okay? And they don't understand that. They don't
Yep.
understand, like, if I could, even my husband, he's like, "If I could do that for you, I would, but you can't." But also my hormones are out of whack, so you hormonally, it impacts your emotions. And I
Hmm.
also wanna speak to those ladies who are wives, like, you don't have to be on the same wavelength as your husband. It's okay if you need more than what he may need, 'cause
Absolutely.
they don't that girl, Nico would take the baby and sleep on his chest, and I'd be looking at him like, "How is it so easy for you to do this? Like, do something with him." But we don't have to do that, and you shouldn't feel like you have to require yourself to be or feel
Hmm.
that way.
Yep, absolutely. Thank you for that. Because me and my husband go through that same thing. I Things that are a huge deal to me, for him, it's like, oh, there's nothing. Like, I can do it, whatever. It's like, okay, so nothing ever bothers you. Like, so you just okay.
You sound like
Like,
we got the same husband, literally.
we do. And so, is he a Taurus?
He's not. My husband is a Scorpio, which is, when I
Oh.
say nonchalant, it's like nonchalant on a different level, okay?
That is
'Cause I'm a
hilarious.
Leo, so I'm like real out here, sis, okay? I'm like, "You need to put these," he's just like, "Calm down."
Right. So look, yeah, my husband is very much the one that's like, nothing is ever a big deal. And I'm the one that's like, I have anxiety. This is a
Mhm.
big deal. I'm overwhelmed. And so I have had to also learn, like, just because he's able to show up seemingly in this way that is super unbothered, it's okay for me to be bothered. Like, it's okay for something to be overstimulating for
100%.
me and it to not even him have not even noticed it. You know what I'm saying? And it's like, it's because we have different needs. And so the point of this episode today is to, like, one, be aware of what your needs are, and really, like you said, like, really advocating for what you need and what supports you need to help you in your journey in navigating your mental health as a mom. But like, yeah, I had to also work through that, because there were moments where it's like, damn, if he's not bothered by this, like, if this is not overwhelming him, or if he's not overstimulated by having all this loud music on while the dog is barking and the kids are crying, why am I? And it's because, look, we are different. Okay. Like, I cannot take all the dog barking, the kids crying, the TV on. It's like, no, that overstimulates my system. And it's okay for him to not have that same experience.
Mhm.
So, yeah.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely,
Yeah.
and I think hubbies are amazing, especially when you have one that understands your temperament. Like,
Yes.
Nico understands how, he's like, he'll say in a minute, "Yeah, baby's out of your hair." I'm like, "Sure is." Okay, because it's just, he understands. And like you said, we have different needs, and that's just good to know as a new mom, or a mom in general, or a mom of three. you have different needs.
Yes, absolutely. And so there was a point I want to make sure we go back to, like, if you are a mom, and no matter the age of your child, if you are having a reaction to your child of, like, feeling like, oh, I want to get away, or oh, I can't take no more crying, or anything like that, it doesn't mean that there's something wrong with you. And instead, it might mean that there's something that you're needing that you're not receiving right now. And
Yeah.
so I think what happens is that a lot of times, if we have a reaction like of like our kid coming to us and our first reaction is like, oh, just get away, we feel like, oh my gosh, I'm a terrible mom because I don't want my kid around. And it's like, no, girl, that's actually normal, but it's normal in the way that it's like it's common for moms to experience that, but it also is an indicator that, hey, your needs are not being met. And so
Yep.
how do we make sure that your needs are met so that you can have a more joyful experience? And of course, it's not going to be joyful all the time, because let's be real, this motherhood is crazy. I don't know why
Yeah.
we all doing this,
Yeah.
but we're here because we love it,
Hmm.
and it's crazy.
Hmm.
And so, really thinking about, like, there's not anything wrong with me. However, there might be a need that is not being met for me. And how can we help to
Yeah.
support?
Yeah. And I think one of the things that I've definitely come to terms with is that when I might be frustrated or a little more on edge, it's not Elijah, my son. It's not my son.
Right.
It's I may be reacting to the out of controlness of the way the room looks, like the overstimulation. I might be He's now at this place where he wants to climb up the stairs, and I'm like, this is so unsafe. So just the feeling of being out of control a lot of times triggers moms.
Mhm.
And that is not you, sis. That's just being triggered by a
Yep.
lot of times we're thinking farther ahead than our kids. But also the other thing is there might have been something that might have happened 3 or 4 days ago that might have upset you that you never processed. And
Mhm.
so this is why I always advocate for counseling, because it becomes that outside space that's completely unbiased, and you have a moment to process how you feel. Your husband might have made you upset and you let it go in your mind, but subconsciously it's still there and you're frustrated with it. I know for me, I'm running a full-time business while being a mom. I'm always thinking about things for my business that might trigger me in my emotions that have nothing to do with my kid. But then when I'm a mom and I'm being a mom in that moment, I'm fully present in that. But I am aware of like what's going on with me. So yeah, there are times where I'm just like, I just need a minute. Probably more often than I would like, but there is a need of maybe I need to go work on something for my business. Maybe I need to go take a shower. Maybe I've had my coffee today, but it's still cold and I haven't really been able to drink it. Like those are things that I want, but it's a need, like you said, wanting to be met.
Mhm. Definitely. So I know we have a few more minutes, but
Yep.
also I have like a few more questions.
Yeah,
And
go ahead.
so I think you already did this though. Like, I wanted to hear from you like some more concrete examples of like what advocating for your mental health actually looks like for moms. And so, I know you gave that one example of like for you when you were early in motherhood, kind of uh telling your husband like make sure I take a shower and brush my teeth, or like letting your husband know like, hey, I pump, you feed, or like just things like that. What are some other like tangible concrete ways that moms might advocate for their mental health? Because I think sometimes we hear that and we're thinking, well, honestly, I don't know what people are thinking. And so I'm curious to hear from you, like, what does that look like?
I would absolutely say one of the things that I did, that I got this from a friend. I can't even take credit for this. But I got this from a friend when I was pregnant. And any mom, you can do this now. You don't have to be pregnant to do this. It's called a happy list. It was something I put in my phone before I was pregnant of things I enjoyed, which when you become a mom, I feel like sometimes those go out the window because you're always kind of in motherhood moving. And so the list included going to Starbucks. Everybody know I love Starbucks. Going to Target, taking a hot bath, um, having a mimosa. That's my drink, mimosa or a glass of wine. Um, Making my bed up in the morning so I can get into the bed at night with like a nice clean bed, because the bed don't be made all the time. Um, Being able to put on nice clean lounge clothes, being able to have my hair done, get my nails done, being able to do something that brings me joy. And they included both things I could do at home and things I could do outside of the home and things that worked on maintenance. Because advocating for your mental health sometimes is getting out of the house. Advocating for your mental health sometimes is doing something in the house that's separate from the baby. Having my mom come over, asking people to cook for me. Um, and so those become small things that can pour into you that aren't required of spending money or doing something different outside of the house, but you can easily gravitate to. Another way to advocate for your mental health is there will be times where I would tell my husband, hey, we would switch off putting the baby to bed. Of course, like when nursing came, like there were times where I did nurse the baby, like when we were trying to sleep train and all this kind of stuff. But um, we would switch off. So every other day we would switch off putting the baby to bed. We would communicate before we would go to sleep. Okay, what's the night plan? Um, there were times where now every other weekend my mom will take the baby for a day. So like finding spaces to do that. Like I can't even tell you really the last time me and my husband went on a date. I think it was in January sometime, but date times used to be important to us. So like how can we create those times now for ourselves? So we did a lot of things outside of um going out of the house. So I bought these date cards on Amazon, and like we would have conversations with over drinks. We did something during the pandemic too, but also like I bought him these drink cards and we made drinks on Fridays. That was like our day to like do drinks and while the baby was asleep. So finding ways to advocate that may not always include me being by myself, but maybe with my partner. Those are some things. But I also did like I set up calls with my friends every week. So like I would say I need to FaceTime. So I would set up calls with them. So those are small ways of tangibly being able to do things to advocate for myself. But I just really tried to voice when I needed those things from my partner or myself with other people.
Yep, I love that. And I know that there are mamas who are listening who are like, hearing this and thinking like, wow, that's something I can do, or wow, that's something that I feel like I need. So I'm hoping that this can like be inspiration for some of you all listening. Like, this is how you can advocate for your mental health. This is how you can show up for your mental health. Rosalind, I'm so grateful for you. Thank you so much for coming and really, talking with us about this. Is there anything else you feel like we should know when it comes to advocating for your mental health?
I would say it's probably one of the most important gifts you could give yourself. Um, it looks different for everybody. If people deal with anxiety differently, people deal with depression differently. But when you really are feeling like you're alone, I promise you, you're not. Push into those spaces. I know Amber provides this podcast, but she has a community. Like push into those spaces, so that you can get the things you need. Because I promise you, you're not a burden. You're not alone. You're not by yourself enough to where you couldn't get out of something if you were in it. But if you are experiencing something more than what you would probably feel like you need, like there's nothing wrong with asking for help and there's nothing wrong with getting help. It doesn't make you less of a mom, less of a person. I boohoo cried when I put my son in daycare. I was like, why do I have to be so ambitious? But it was something that was necessary. So know that you're not a bad mom because of that. And it's the most important thing you could ever do for yourself.
Wow, that was a word. Thank you so much.
Welcome.
Where can the mamas connect with you if they want to reach out?
Yeah, so I'm primarily on Instagram at Rosyln Rene, Roslynrene. Or you can listen to me on the Therapy as a Christian podcast. It's everywhere you listen to podcasts. I'm on there every week. I do a podcast every week. And I talk about all things mental health and God. But I also talk about a bunch of stuff too, sis. So it's not just that. So you can find me on there. And those are my primary spaces.
Awesome. Well, I hope that you all connect with Rosalind. Again, thank you so much for being with us today. This was a really great episode, and I appreciate you so much.
You're welcome. Bye.
Hey, Mama. Thank you for listening to the Balanced Working Mama podcast. If you love this podcast, please be sure to rate it and share it with another mama that you know. And don't forget to follow me and Balanced Working Mama on Instagram. I'll talk to you soon.